The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the December webinar titled Budgeting, Helping You Reach Your Goals, Helping You Achieve Your Dreams, courtesy of Great West Financial. We certainly appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today. This webinar is part of our ongoing monthly webinar series, and today our presentation will provide an overview of some basic budgeting strategies. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First, please note that in order to ensure everyone has the ability to hear the information presented by our guest speaker, everyone will be on mute during the webinar. During the presentation, feel free to write in any questions that you have on the Q&A link on the webinar menu. Then, at the end of the presentation, we will take some time to go through these. With that said, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Deborah Batchelor, Client Relationship Manager at Great West Financial. Deborah specializes in corporate pension plans and is an essential resource for other relationship managers at Great West. We are very excited to have Deborah here to share some insight on budgeting strategies. I would really like to thank Deborah for taking the time to get on this call with us. And with that said, Deborah, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christine, and welcome everyone to our seminar on the advantages of budgeting. Why should you create and stick to a budget if you're not doing it already? Today that's what we'll be discussing, and some basic strategies that will get you on your road to successful budgeting. But before I start, I have to tell you that today the information is for general education purposes only. I'm not able to give you financial, legal, or tax advice. And for that kind of specific financial help, you should consult with your financial planner, attorney, or accountant. So let's begin. So what is a budget? Obviously, it's crunching numbers to help you ensure that the money you spend doesn't exceed the money that you earn. But it's also something more. Budgeting is really just a plan. It can be a plan for saving more money, funding your retirement, allocating money to certain investments you're interested in, or determining how to spend and spend wisely. You probably know approximately how much you spend each month, but you might be surprised to find out you're overlooking some expenses. And knowing where and how you spend money is the first step in creating a budget. Budgeting is more than simply deciding what portion of your money should go to which expense. It's also a way of increasing your financial predictability. When you have a clear understanding of how much you earn and where you're spending that money, this is going to help you to maximize your financial worth. You can allocate funds to certain investments and accounts that may pay dividends down the road, or you can improve your readiness for the inevitable financial surprises that come along the way, like paying for braces for your kids at some point, or your water heater breaks down, or different things like that that come up in life. And with the discipline that a budget enforces, you may improve your standing with lenders. When lenders see that you're very good at paying on time and that you're not carrying big balances on credit cards, that you know exactly how you're spending your money, then you become more desirable as a loan candidate. And your credit scores can improve considerably as well. Step one in budgeting is evaluating your income. And possibly there's more to your income picture than just your paycheck from your employer. You might earn money from a side job you do on the weekend or some self-employment work. Maybe you're receiving monthly alimony or child support. These are all different types of income that you need to take into consideration, and they're part of the equation. You need to be aware of all of these to create a solid and accurate foundation for your budgeting. And sometimes a good place to start is to look at your tax return filing from last year to identify these different income sources. The next step that you take to determine your budget is to figure out all of your expenses. A good way to analyze your expenses is to break them down into two categories: fixed expenses and variable expenses. Fixed expenses can be those that are relatively predictable month to month, for example, like our taxes, your mortgage payment or rent, utilities, insurance premiums or car payments, they're usually pretty consistent from month to month. Then there's variable expenses that can change at any given time. For example, food costs. Many of us are spending more on food this time of year as we're gathering together with our families for the holidays. Fuel costs change. It wasn't that long ago. We were spending over $4.50 a gallon, and now we're down into the $3.50 range. So that can be variable. And then also medical costs go up and down depending on your changing needs. The same is true for the list that's here. They're difficult to predict. One strategy to budgeting for these items is to analyze similar expenses that you've had from the previous year and kind of hone on an approximate range to figure this out. And as you do this, keep in mind that inflation does have an impact on the cost of these things, and we've got to take that into consideration as well. So after you've established these expenses, then you need to track your spending. And a good idea to try out is to track your spending for at least 2 months, where you're spending your money. You may not have control over your income so much, but you do have control over your spending. It's one of the areas that we can change. And the best way to start in cutting back is to look at those expenses and know where they're coming from or where we're spending. We recommend maintaining a detailed spending log of your activity. It's probably not going to be the most exciting thing to do, but you'll be surprised if you log all the cash that you spend, every time you use your credit card, debit card, log your checks in your checkbook, maybe even save receipts in an envelope somewhere, and just keep track of every transaction. At the end of 2 months, go through that and take a look at all the things that you've spent money on. You might be pretty surprised at how much you've spent and what you've spent your money on. And maybe there's some areas that you'll start to see where you can trim your expenses without too much difficulty. You've probably already started thinking about different types of expenses that you have and what things you could cut. One effective way to do that is to put them into categories and prioritize each one. We all have different priorities, so which ones are most important to you? Which expenses are unavoidable? Which ones are luxuries? Luxuries are almost always easier to do without. A couple unavoidable expenses would be like mortgages or rent or utilities. Luxuries might be going out to dinner, movies, or purchasing or standing in line for the latest electronic device. So some of those luxuries we can skip on. It's almost like skipping dessert at the end of the meal. You really need that. Also, which expenses are short-term and which ones are long-term? Are any expenses unnecessary? Can you trim some of the short-term expenses to fund the longer-term ones? Maybe get rid of some of that credit card debt so you can apply some of that money or that payment money towards a car payment and get rid of the car payment debt a little bit quicker. This is the area that most people associate with the word budget. As I said earlier, you can't always control your income, but you can control your spending. It really just takes some discipline. Some expenses can be decreased. Do you really need that daily latte, or can you get along with it just once or twice a week? Other expenses can be eliminated. Maybe you shouldn't have so much caffeine at all, or the doctor wants you to not drink so much coffee. Keep in mind that the goal isn't to completely strip yourself of all the comforts and luxuries in life. We work hard for our money, so we want to treat ourselves once in a while. Instead, budgeting will help you better understand how you use your income so that you can reach all of your financial goals and know when you have that extra money so you can go after those luxuries. It gives you the perspective you need to make better decisions about things that are near-term indulgences. So now it's time to do some math. Compare the consolidated income and compare the consolidated expenses. Do you have a surplus or do you have a deficit? The fact is, conscious management of your personal finances requires a budget, regardless of whether you do have a deficit or a surplus. If you find yourself in a position where expenses are higher than income, look at your variable expenses to find areas that you can trim. Because these are expenses that are typically non-essential, it should be easy to shave a couple dollars in this area to come closer to your income. Okay. It is important to set goals. If you're like most people, you don't just have a single goal in mind. You probably have several. Some of them are in the near future. Some of them are further out, further down the road. And as you clarify your financial goals, determine whether you want to reach them within the year, within 5 years, or even further into the future. And as you do this, record the financial impact of these goals. How much will each of them cost you? Keep in mind that your intermediate and long-term goals should take inflation into consideration and interest rates into account. The cost of a house or college education will be higher, most likely in the future, than they are today. And in 5 years, a car payment may be higher due to the increased cost of the sticker price from year to year, as well as changes in interest rates. Well, you know, one tip that has been really helpful is when you are saving for a car and you purchase that car, whatever the car payment is that you're making and you've paid that car off, continue saving that car payment for the next 2 years. In 2 years, you should have enough money to possibly buy a used car and pay cash for it, or have a sizable down payment for another new car. Cars are always going to wear out. We know we're always going to need another one at some point, so why not plan ahead and be prepared for that? So once you've set your short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals, it's time to prioritize. And like I said before, everybody's priorities are a little bit different. So you've got to take a look at how your income compares to your goals. Do you have the champagne taste with the beer budget? Look at the near-term and the long-term goals. Which goals require the most money? When will you need that money? If it's a long-term goal, maybe it's saving for retirement. You won't need that money for a long time if you're starting out saving when you're in your 20s or 30s. Are the goals equally important? Some are going to be more important than others. Where does the kitchen remodeling rank? So that's all going to be a little bit different for each of us. And so as you're thinking about all of this, has your perspective changed on what your priorities are, what those goals are? Possibly it's changed for some of us. There are scores of small steps you can take to increase the amount that you save each month. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these that are listed here. Many spending habits are so ingrained in us that we don't even know that we're spending them. But that's why it's a great idea to keep track of all those spending and expenditures in an envelope for a couple of months. This slide lists a few suggestions for ways to list some common expenses. When you pay more towards monthly minimum payment on your debt, you reduce the principal. It's a great idea if you can get out of the habit of making the minimum payment on a credit card and pay extra on it. You should consider paying down debt that has a higher interest rate first. Typically, those are going to be your credit cards. But did you also know that you may qualify for a lower interest rate on that credit card payment? Your credit card company is not going to offer that to you automatically, so you might want to take the step and actually contact them and see if you qualify for a low interest rate. Keep making that higher payment on that credit card, even with the lower interest rate, so you can get that paid off sooner. When you're finding ways to achieve your goals, don't skimp on your personal savings, except as an absolute last resort. If we don't save money for our personal savings on the side, then we end up using credit cards to purchase things when those inevitable expenses come up. So it's great to have cash to be able to pay for those instead of using our credit cards. Of course, you will need to consider your current financial situation before deciding how to cut your current expenses and whether certain methods are applicable or appropriate for your situation. Those are some personal decisions that you need to determine. Once you begin analyzing your expenses in this way, no doubt you'll uncover some other expenses that you didn't even realize. The key is to create and stick to a budget. Be disciplined about it, and make adjustments in your spending as applicable. It's also important to review your budget on a monthly basis. So now that you've set your budget and come up with some goals, and you've got some helpful tips to achieve those goals, definitely review your budget. I say review it on a monthly basis, but do it regularly. Also, once a year, take a look at the big picture. See the credit cards that you've been able to eliminate. Look at your savings account and see how it's grown. Appreciate the victories that you've had over the year of being disciplined with your budget. So doing this will help you better stay on track, continue to evaluate this, maybe make some changes as your financial circumstances change and improve. So this presentation is really just the beginning. The real work starts when you get home tonight and start looking at your expenses and setting your goals. So if you find that you want some help clarifying your financial picture, here's a list of some good places to start. Of course, there's a wealth of information out there with the internet. We have a lot of tools available to us that can help us with the budgeting process. And also determining how much money we might need to set aside for retirement. Your 401k plan provider probably has some great tools that you can use on their website for helping you figure out the gap analysis. How much do you really need to be saving for retirement to reach your goals? So if you have any trouble with figuring out your budget, or maybe need a little bit of help with some debt counseling, there are some credit counselor services out there that you might want to look into. So thank you for attending our meeting today. I hope that this information has been informative and gives you some ideas on how you can budget and help you to reach your retirement goals. I know that Pensionmark and your plan provider, they're all looking forward to helping you in preparing for retirement and reaching your goals. You can like Pensionmark on Facebook. You can follow them on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. And here's some contact information for you to contact Pensionmark when you have questions about your 401k plan or your pension in general. There's also their email address and website. And keep in mind that they're all licensed, and they have bilingual licensed representatives there to assist you as well. I want to thank you for joining our webinar today. At this time, if you have any questions, please go ahead and input those for Christine, and we'll address those at this time.
Thank you, Deborah. That was all very insightful information. We will now start addressing some of the questions that have been filtering in. Please remember that if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A tool on the webinar menu. As always, for any plan-specific questions, you can always reach out to your dedicated service team here at Pensionmark. As we wait for questions to filter in, I would like to take a minute, as Deborah said, to let everyone know that Pensionmark is now on social media. If you would like to keep up to date on the latest retirement plan news and events, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and connect with us on LinkedIn. We will also be posting the replay of this webinar on our website. If you would like to view the replay, please visit the Investor Education Center at www.pensionmark.com. So we'll wait for a couple questions to filter in. Just take a couple minutes. If you have any questions, as mentioned, please use the Q&A tool on the webinar menu. All right, looks like we have one question. Here it says, will you please review the 4 questions to ask ourselves about our goals? Deborah, I'll turn that one over to you.
Okay. So there are several questions we should ask ourselves about our goals. First of all, you want to clarify what your financial goals are, determine whether you want to reach them within a year, 5 years, or even further into the future. So you've got to put a timeline on it and set that. As you do this, then record the impact of those goals and how much it's going to cost you to reach all of those goals. Okay, once you've determined the short-term, the intermediate, and the long-term goals, then you ask yourself some questions. Which goals will require the most money? When will you need that money? Are your goals equally important? Because we want to prioritize them properly as well. So those are some questions that you want to ask yourself about your goals.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Doesn't look like we have any other questions as of right now. So that will conclude our question and answer period. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your dedicated service team here at Pensionmark. I thank you all for joining us today, and once again, Deborah, I would like to thank you for taking the time to present today. This now concludes the webinar.